Left of the box.
It's partially economics because men, especially college undereducated men, as load as that term is, feel that women are getting advances ahead of them, especially at the same time you're seeing women get more advanced degrees at for the first time in history at a higher level than men were. And then you're seeing a social thing where, through the Me Too movement, kind of like you're mentioning here, that a lot of men who don't really remember or weren't really alive during a time or weren't really conscious during a time before a lot of the Me Too stuff was happening only see it as like a zero sum gain between what women are actually in reality. And, we're talking about this in an unfortunately very binary context, but for the sake of brevity here, please. Um, we're Women are in reality trying to make back gains that they had lost, much in the same way that in America, Black folks are trying to make back gains, and Latino folks are trying to make back gains that have been lost through systemic discrimination by systems that exist in these capitalist countries. And so there's the economic aspect that way I just mentioned, there's the social aspect that I just mentioned, and then there's the media aspect that was mentioned again brilliantly in the interview that you just had, that goes towards the Andrew Tates, the Ben Shapiros, which kind of sums across a lot of what you've like kind of brilliantly put together in the show here, is how media, a lot of the stuff, we're consuming it kind of to get through our day. For some of it to get some information on what's going on. For some of it as like a thing to put on the background. For some of it as a coping mechanism because we have friends and good relationships with these people we see on screen that may contrast heavily to the relationships we have in real life. That all has to be respected when you're in this kind of game, right? But when you're in this kind of game, there's a lot of different incentives and there's a lot of those different factors of relationships being played upon. And a lot of men get reached in those super vulnerable positions, and they unfortunately fall down these rabbit holes where, they could be more overtly political rabbit holes where they're certainly starting to believe into more conservative things that not only go against, in this gender paradigm that this study has done, against women's rights and women's equality, but are things that go against human rights and human equality more broadly. And there's things that are just, more pro business, more corporate, less of, you know, freedom for more and more people. And then you get to these I mean, like, just, broadly speaking, you have these factions who are reaching out to these really vulnerable male audiences who I think to what you're getting at, unfortunately, on the left, don't have enough, not saying there aren't out there, but don't have enough solidified counter programming to be able to say, hey, look, there's a better way to live out there. There's a, healthier way to live, not just better,
Mhm.
but just objectively healthier way to live than just rejecting this junk food style content you're receiving. Throw in some vegetables in there, and if you learn how to season them properly, you'll understand the vegetables taste better than the chips. They taste better
Mhm.
than the soda, right? And I think this is the process of teaching a lot of young folks there. I also think that there's, to be slightly optimistic, maybe we're at a time where with the internet and with how much media we have, we're able to pull under 18-year-olds and people we traditionally didn't think of as being smart enough to vote and hold political opinions for their dumbass opinions. And I remember having dumbass opinions that thankfully no one came and asked me and my like boy group friend in high school and middle school about. Thanks God, because they would have been some pretty dumbass opinions, probably, again, not necessarily me, but also necessarily me, substantially worse than what you're hearing from a lot of these social media actors right now. So I think maturity comes a lot with this. Let's allow people to mature, but let's also create roots for folks to mature in ways that
Mhm.
allow them to be more open-minded people.
Yeah, like so many times I've seen men try to talk, come out with things and issues that they have, only to be mocked and laughed at or told to go away by people on the left. because a lot of women are fed up with certain topics. But then who's left to teach them? Who's left to help them, guide them through a lot of this confusion that they're facing? And sometimes it feels like the left can be quite hostile to men, especially men who are socially awkward, who haven't figured things out, who've only been exposed to Andrew Tate type people. Like, we don't have a leftist Andrew Tate. We don't have a role model on the left for men that's really, popular.
You have burgeoning individuals. I think,
Mm,
for better or worse, Hassan sits in this world. I think Vosh and Destiny kind of
mhm,
sit in this world as like, particularly manly people. And
mhm,
like I again, based on my trolls in my comment section, maybe I'm not perceived as the most like cisgender male person, but I am. And, I try to express how I am as a version of, you know, all of the experiences,
mhm,
the intersectionalities that make up Dan from the internet in maybe a way that a younger Dan from the internet may not have seen represented in
mhm,
media, that a current Dan from the internet also doesn't see necessarily represented in media. And so I think I want to do that, and I respect other folks
mhm,
who want to do that in a type of way. And I think that there's an audience for that just by how weird
mhm,
algorithms work. But yeah, it's this desirability that has been pushed by people with bravado, just like, debate lord culture was
mhm,
largely pushed by bravado. And, much like I'm a lot on tech YouTube, I'm a lot on car YouTube, certain tech brands like Apple or certain car brands like Bugatti always
mhm,
get the attention compared to like, hey yo, I know Bugatti made like, a really sick car that's like pushing the limits of technology, or Ferrari, whatever. But this Kia over here is actually kind of good, right?
mhm,
Like,
mhm.
you have those situations where every once in a while stuff gets surprised. And
Yeah.
so, whether it's politics, whether it's cars, whether it's tech, I think, don't allow your be, and again, when I was talking about earlier about how you're dissecting information, be the type of person who is just aware of how media is made to affect you. And then at that point, hopefully you're able to kind of get ahead of it and
Mhm,
be a little bit smarter about it and not become such a, I'm trying not to use a
mhm,
loaded phrase for this, but like, not succumb so quickly to
mhm,
what the algorithms want you to believe, because those
mhm,
algorithms are making money not off of you being a better person and not being off of you being a better community member and not being off of you being more informed, but off of you getting more sucked into the drama.
mhm. Yeah. Well, don't tell him I said this, but Jeff Wiggins, I think, is a phenomenal role model for men.
I agree. I think that's
Absolutely
a great
phenomenal.
example, and,
Yeah.
I'm sorry that I lapsed in
Mhm.
judgment for that. I think
No,
Jeff Wiggins, so I highly
no, like
suggest
on the
folks check out
left,
and subscribe as well
like he
too.
doesn't have the big platform, that's all right now. But I
He's
think,
very much growing. Yeah, yes.
yeah, I think he's an absolute phenomenal role model for men.
Co-host
Um,
on Power Report, also I will
mhm.
say.